Hi folks, today we're going to do a unboxing and first impressions of the Lenovo S340 that we featured as a quick pick recently. So let's go ahead and open up the box. Now as usual, with something you get from Lenovo, they tend to put a lot of packing in it. We're probably going to find a lot of styrofoam set up as sort of a support infrastructure inside the box to keep it from getting jostled around much as it moves. And sure enough, as you can see, it's pretty well supported, sort of suspended inside that styrofoam inside the box. And then there's a side box that has the charger for the laptop. Now this is a barrel charger, but I believe that this laptop comes with USB-C and that we should be able to charge via USB-C. So let's take it out and take a look. As usual with Lenovo, not too much documentation. Most of that's intended to be handled either by the sort of guided setup that you go through or by Lenovo's assistance software that they install. It's a nice size, even though this is a 15.6-inch laptop. It's really not that heavy, and it does have the new approach by Lenovo, which is putting the logo there on the edge rather than emblazoning it as a large thing there on the back. Let's go ahead and, you know what, I've got a USB-C charger here, so just go ahead and pull that cord over. We'll hook it up, and right off the bat we'll go ahead and make sure that we can charge it via USB-C. So sort of a soft cloth to protect the screen, and another piece of documentation inside here, which is a little bit strange. Just basically registration information. Okay, so let's try turning it on and seeing. Now it may be that even if it does charge via USB-C, that's not the optimal way. So I am going to go ahead and hook up the barrel charger, and then we'll investigate later to see whether or not that USB-C charger will work or not. Even though I'm a big fan of USB-C charging, one of the things that, if you've run into it before, you've encountered, is that there tend to be different amounts of power, and it's not really all that standardized yet in terms of what's coming from what. So the USB-C charger I had actually was for a Chromebook, and it might not be putting out enough wattage. So let's plug the barrel charger in. I'll just go ahead and leave the USB-C unhooked for right now, and now let's try to start it up. Now as we wait for it to boot up, I have to say I like the feel of this. It's got the metallic back on it. Also, I can't tell. I think it's more plastic in terms of the upper part here, but it feels good. It feels like a matte finish. It's not too glossy. I've seen a couple of people on the internet talk about the fact that the trackpad is centered to the left. That's because they managed, with this being a 15.6-inch, to get the dedicated number pad over here. So it is more or less, the trackpad is more or less centered on the conventional keyboard type of it, and that's pretty good. So it is booting up, and we'll go through a setup.
Hi there, I'm Cortana, and I'm here to help.
Of course, one of the first things we do is
a little sign in here, a touch of Wi-Fi.
We'll get Cortana not to talk to us. And I'll probably edit this out and speed this up so that you don't have to go through the actual setup. Just in terms of the keys have this, I don't know what to call it, a scalloped shape, I guess, sort of rounded on the bottom, flat on the top. It is familiar to anybody that's ever used a ThinkPad, but it's obviously not the same type of keys. They're not quite as high quality. The travel's not as much, and they feel a little bit mushy, to be honest. But it's not bad. In terms of port selection, we've got full HDMI, USB-C, and it looks like a headphone jack on that side. And then on this side, we've got two more USB-As. Looks like a full-size SD card. And then there's a little hole for a microphone on that right-hand side. That's odd that it's a full-size SD card. You can certainly take a micro SD card with an adapter, and it is good because a lot of people that have cameras and video cams and so forth do like the full SD size. So one of the features that Lenovo's getting pretty good about adding on all of their laptops now is this little cover for the webcam right above it. That's a handy feature for privacy. Screen's not too bad. I've actually worked with quite a few Lenovo laptops over the years, and this isn't as dim as the screen on some of them. It is dimmer than you will see on an Asus or an HP or one of those. But I think, to be honest, I think some of that's intentional, just because if the screen's a little bit dimmer, then you'll get a little bit less drain on the battery from servicing or from rendering everything on the screen. Okay, so we're going to go through setup, and I'm going to pause this, and then I'll restart it again once we get up and running. And we're back. Found out a couple of things over the gap there. First of all, it turns out this will not charge through USB-C. Went ahead and tried a couple of other USB-C chargers that have a little bit more wattage going through them, and it simply is not going to work. I guess we shouldn't be too surprised. There was no promise on the Walmart site or any of the other official sites that I saw concerning this laptop that it would be doing USB-C charging. But to be quite honest, one of the reasons I do this video is these kinds of videos is that Walmart isn't real informative on their site about the specs and the capabilities of the laptops. Now, the other thing I did is I brought out an older Dell machine, because I think as we go through and talk about my first impressions of this machine, it's going to be helpful to compare and contrast it to the last 15.6-inch machine I bought, which is probably around 3 or 4 years old now. Now, a couple of things. First of all, this thing is so much smaller in terms of footprint, in terms of weight and everything. And let me do this. I'm going to actually put the new laptop right on top of the old laptop, and then I'll bring the camera around so you can see the difference in size of the two. So got the top left corner sort of synced up between the two, and if you look over here, you'll see that the old Dell laptop looks like almost an inch deeper, I guess, if you're taking front to back on the keyboard, and almost an inch wider on the side there. And I'm actually going to take a weird perspective here and get down like this so you guys can get a feel for the difference in, let me back up just a little bit here, the difference in width too. That's not really wanting to focus very well. Now, I'll be honest, part of the reason for the difference in size is that this old Dell machine, it wasn't a gaming machine per se, but it did have, I think, one of the older generation HQ i5 processors. That is, wow, that's really, sorry, things got sort of screwed around there when I was moving things. So let's get this back situated so you guys can see what's going on here. But what I was saying is the older Dell machine that I've got here for comparison is a little bit more capable. It had a dedicated, had a discrete graphics card, so it needed a little bit more cooling. And a lot of times that's why you get chunkier laptops, because they do need cooling. But looking inside the Lenovo here, it's pretty obvious in terms of where that space savings came from. It all has to do with the screen bezel. So if you look at the old laptop, and I'm not going to try moving that webcam around anymore, but the old laptop has somewhere between 3/4 and 1/2 of an inch of bezel all the way around it. This new one, it has about the same size bezel down here on the bottom, and that's typical because I think a lot of the circuitry for the display goes there. It has a much smaller bezel on the top, and it still does have a bezel though, so you can put the webcam. Some of the real small, thin and light new laptops try to put the webcam down here, and it just doesn't work out well. Nobody likes it, and nobody likes to look at people that are using that type. But in particular, if you look at the side bezels on this laptop, they are practically non-existent, to be honest, compared to the old Dell machine. And I think that's where they saved a lot of space. This up here is a couple of centimeters smaller than the top bezel on older machines, but the side bezels are probably 3 centimeters each shorter than, or smaller than they would be on new machines. Now, overall first impressions, I'm pretty impressed with this. There is some flex, for instance, when you open it up, there's a little bit of give, a little bit of wiggle, if you will, in the screen. But that's because that's actually a fairly thin screen. You do have to be pretty careful with it. I wouldn't give this to very young kids to play with or anything like that, whereas this old Dell was built like a tank, and I actually let my son play around on it when he was like 3 and 4 and so forth. The other impression that I've got is that I do like the keys here. They're not as good as keys on Lenovo's ThinkPad line or their higher end lines, and to be honest, these keys are probably about equivalent to an Acer level or one of the other cheaper manufacturers. I do like the size. Now, when I say I like the size, there's something strange to be pointed out about the size here. I think that another way that Lenovo saved some width and maybe even some depth on this keyboard is that the numeric keypads over here to the side are sort of strange. They're about twice as tall as they are wide. In other words, they're very close in size to the last digit of my finger when I'm pressing on them. And you especially see this tendency to be skinny and tall if you look over here on the enter and, for instance, the plus keys on this numeric keypad. Those things are a lot skinnier than what I'm used to seeing. It's not a big deal. I don't really spend much time on a numeric keypad, and I think very few of us do unless you're an accountant or if you're a gamer and you like having the directional arrows, which are also part of the numeric keypad. I think they also economized, if you will, and that's not necessarily meant in a bad way, but also saved some space by making the function keys up here really short. I mean, they're about as wide as the rest of the keys, but in terms of vertical height, they're very, very small. Now, one other thing that I was just thinking about that I didn't even check yet, if we press function space, yeah, there's no backlighting. I didn't think there was, but I just wanted to double check and make sure that I wasn't missing out on something there. But I will say that given that the numeric keypad keys are small and skinny, and these keys up here are short and relatively wide, the rest of the keys, the typewriter type keys, are actually a fairly nice size. Now there are, when you take and put a numeric keypad in addition to a regular keyboard inside a 15.6-inch machine, there are some accommodations you have to make. One of those is that your spacebar here isn't all that long. The other thing is that your enter key is probably not as big as it would be on a machine that did not have this numeric keypad over to the side. But all in all, I'm pretty happy with it. Now, I did go ahead and boot in and got my account set up, went in and tested or looked at the configuration. It is the i5 with 8 gig of RAM that we thought we were ordering. It's pretty sprightly. That is, it seems to run fairly quickly. Now remember, this machine, in addition to 8 gig of RAM and an i5, also has a 128 gigabyte NVMe SSD, which is a fairly fast type of SSD. So it boots up pretty quickly, it runs things, it opens programs fairly quickly. I'm also, I'm also okay with the screen. You know, is it dimmer than other screens I've seen? Yes. Is it as dim as Lenovo's that I've used in the past? No, it's actually not. It's actually fine. I think any type of laptop, if you take it out in the bright sunlight, it's going to get washed out a little bit. But this thing, other than when it dims because it's trying to conserve power when I'm not actually typing on it, I think it's perfectly fine as far as I'm concerned. Now, let me tell you what the plan is. I'm going to install Office and some other software that I use on a regular basis, and I'm going to try to use this not really as my daily driver, but on a fairly consistent basis over the next couple of weeks. And that's using it stock out of the box, you know, with the RAM it came with the storage it came with, and so forth. And so after a couple of weeks, I'll do a more in-depth review and talk about things I like, things I don't like. By then, I'll have had a chance to figure out exactly where I'm at in terms of the keyboard. I think the keyboard's going to turn out okay. I don't think it's great, to be honest. I just don't, even though it looks a lot like their higher end keyboards, it doesn't feel like they're higher end. It doesn't have as much travel and so forth. But so after a couple of weeks, I'll do a review on that, and then I think I'm actually going to open this thing up and rev it up a little bit. Now, my understanding is that there are two sticks of RAM in this thing, each of them having 4 gig. One of them soldered to the board, and we can't replace that one, but the other one we could swap out. And I found a 16 gig stick of RAM on Amazon that's compatible with this machine for about 65 bucks. So we could go from 4 gig to 20 gig of RAM, which is probably overkill for many people, but if you do lots of tabs or lots of data science programs like I do, it would be handy. So we could upgrade the RAM immensely for about 60 bucks. And then I've also got a 2 terabyte hard drive. My understanding is there's also a bay to put a hard drive in this thing in addition to the SSD. So you wouldn't want to boot off of a hard drive, but it would give you a heck of a lot more storage if you wanted to store movies or files or music or something along those lines. So after a couple of weeks, after I've made that sort of, you know, working with it for 2 weeks stock, how did I like it? Then I'll go back and make another video after that for doing some light, simple upgrades. It will involve taking the back of this machine off, and Lenovo is usually pretty good. Yeah, there's a certain number of certain number of screws here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we'll have to take those 10 off and then maybe just gently pry off the bottom. But from videos I've seen online showing the insides of this, it's easily upgradable. So we'll put in the hard drive and we'll put in more RAM, and then we'll take a look at whether that helps in terms of running things. And then even longer term, my understanding is this is also a great machine either for running Ubuntu and other Linux distros, or for even making it into a Hackintosh, which is where you basically take a Apple machine and turn it into an Apple laptop. So maybe we'll look at doing one of those things. But for right now, for the price, the $399 that we got it at, it feels professional. I sort of, I like the I forget what color blue they call this. I like the size. I like the weight. Now it is, I'm not saying that it's lightweight. It's dense. It's got stuff in it, obviously, but it's 2/3 the weight of that old Dell, and I could certainly live with this. Time will tell, so let's wait and see how it is when we're driving around using Office and so forth. But for right now, it still looks like a pretty good idea to me. Take care, and I hope you've liked the video. If so, please subscribe and hit the like button. Talk to you later. Bye.